What is up, guys? Rick Hackus here, and it's Saturday, so it's time for another Exotic Concepts video, showcasing some amazing community-designed exotics for Destiny. Now, this series all got started when I partnered with the artist Benjamin Radaman, who does these amazing exotic concept arts. And so the exotics being shown in this video are actually ideas that came from the comments section of last week's video. So if you've always had an idea for an exotic weapon that would be awesome for Destiny, this is a great opportunity to submit it and hopefully get concept art made of it and it showcased in this series. Now, more details are going to be made at the end of the video for the proper way to submit your idea. But first things first, let's go over this week's exotic concepts. Now, I do want to say that if you want to know any more about the exotics being featured, including their background story, including the rest of the perks that they come with, check out Benjamin Radaman's art station, linked in the description down below. And there's also a lot of exotics that didn't make it into this video. It's also just a nice thing to do to support the artist that is so involved in making this series. And although this series is essentially a bunch of Destiny fans coming together and sharing some really cool ideas for exotics in Destiny, I think that this series is a little bit more important than that. On the one hand, our interest in exotics, like our clear invested interest in exotics, shows Bungie that we really value them. We want to see more of them in future updates and DLCs and events. And so hopefully they'll be motivated to include more exotics in future content. And additionally, although they won't copy any of these exotics word for word, pixel for pixel, there's no reason to think that they won't get inspired by some of the ideas we're presenting today, and some iteration or some version of the exotic concepts shown today won't eventually make its way into Destiny. Now, last week's submissions were so good, we're actually going to showcase a couple more exotics than we usually do, but I'm sure most of you are totally fine with that. So let's start out with the Old Benevolence Exotic Accelerator Rifle by Stitch V2. Now, not only is this an exotic concept, this is a new gun type concept, and essentially it's a charge-up rifle similar to the Sleeper Simulant. Now, I can actually see having a bunch of different charge-up rifles that have different charge times, that have, different damages. I can see that being a viable gun type in Destiny, kind of like fusion rifles, but shooting single projectiles, and then they're essentially one-shot headshots in PvP, but they have lower range optics, so they're a little bit more useful in closer, maybe medium range scenarios. So I can see this potentially being a kind of cool gun type in Destiny. And if it doesn't work out as a full gun type, having a one-off as an exotic could work as well. We already have some pretty unique exotics in the game, something like the Queenbreaker's Bow or the Vex Mythoclast. Those are pretty unique guns and could, be their own gun types as well. Not to mention there is already the Sleeper Simulant. So having a really unique exotic that's essentially its own new gun type is a sweet idea. Now let's get on to the exotic perk of the Old Benevolence. This weapon would, with its exotic perk, no longer shoot one straight projectile. The projectile would now split off into multiple projectiles upon firing. And the more I think about it, the more I think that would be actually pretty awesome. Like, it wouldn't be overpowered in PvP because you're still just shooting like one bullet that would split off into, let's say, 3 directions, and it's very easy still to miss the target. But you do have that chance to get an amazing 2 or 3 for 1, which would be fantastic. And in PvE as well, it wouldn't be tremendously overpowered because if you wanted to actually land all 3 of those multiple projectiles, let's say, on a single target, you'd have to be very close to that target, which would be putting yourself in a lot of danger. But also the chance to, do that and risk your life but then get massive damage output, or just, again, go for those multiple kills with one shot would be a pretty sweet thing. Now let's move on to the next exotic concept, the Apex Chimera Exotic Auto Rifle concept by Rohit. Now this auto rifle's exotic perk would make it so that if you get a kill with this weapon, the enemy that you kill will explode outwards, and it will lightly damage enemies around it, but the main effect is that it will stun those enemies. So a stun would just be a control impairing effect, similar to getting hit by a Night Stalker Hunter's smoke bomb. It just kind of impairs your vision for a little bit, throws you off balance, and that's actually kind of a cool idea. I like how it's not just a damage focused thing, it's a control impairing effect. Like, it would actually kind of matter if you kill someone near a sniper and the sniper's aiming down sights at you and then they get stunned and they're kind of blurry for a little bit. That can actually really matter, and it does keep it, since it doesn't just do massive damage, from being incredibly overpowered. So I actually do like this effect. In PvE as well, just imagine shooting, a thrall, and then it actually just kind of control impairs some of the more powerful AI enemies around it, and that could actually matter as well. Just getting, a wizard to stop shooting at you for a little bit could be the thing that you need your rifle to do. The next exotic concept we're going over is the Templars Wrath exotic heavy railgun by Andreas Biscard. This is yet another new gun type and a new exotic as well, with railguns essentially being just unbelievably powerful sniper rifles in the heavy slot in order to balance their power. Now, firstly, I like the idea of railguns being introduced as a new gun type in Destiny. Again, an unbelievably powerful sniper that, on PvP will kill in one shot regardless of where you hit someone, but it's in the heavy slot. So it's less overpowered than what a lot of you are just thinking by me talking about that, because you can really kind of limit its ammunition. Maybe it only comes with one magazine and a bit. Like, if there's already stuff like the Galahorn and the Truth, in PvP, I'm pretty sure having a sniper rifle that you have to aim down sights, so you have to have perfect aim and get it on someone, is not going to be overpowered, again, compared to how insane some of the rocket launchers and machine guns are already in the game for PvP. Putting in the heavy slot would be the balancing factor, and in PvE, that would be pretty awesome as well, having an alternative to machine guns and rocket launchers, having a more focused and more direct damaging device. The Sleeper Simulant does kind of fill that role right now, and if you do run the Sleeper, it's kind of a really interesting thing, right? Like, that kind of takes up your sniper role, that takes up your boss killing role, and then you're free to run other stuff for your secondary and primary. So I think railguns would be an awesome addition into Destiny. Now, specifically, this gun would have a pretty interesting exotic perk. It would essentially have two different exotic perks that you'd have to choose between. One of the exotic perks would make it so that if you get a headshot with this weapon, it will apply an effect that will significantly slow the enemy you hit with that precision shot. Now, the second perk would make it so that if you get a kill with this weapon, it will start health regeneration. So that's kind of a really interesting thing. The first perk is definitely more of a PvE perk. If you're getting chased by a boss, being able to shoot it in the head and then have it really slow down so you can kind of, get multiple more shots on that enemy, kind of trap him in one location where your team can just go to town. That's an awesome addition. But also just increasing your survivability with the second perk by getting health regen every time you get a kill would also be pretty useful in PvE, but that is definitely more tailored to PvP instead. And then again, having the ability to switch between the two different perks depending on what you're doing is an awesome feature. The next exotic concept we're going over is the Paminns Fury exotic hand cannon concept by Cameron O'Hara. Now, this is kind of a more simplistic idea, but I actually kind of like the simplistic ideas as well. It's just it doesn't need to be incredibly flashy in order to be a good idea. Now, the exotic perk for this hand cannon would make it so that if you get a precision hit with this weapon, it will make you melee faster and do more damage with your melee for a short time, around 5 seconds. Now, the more I thought about it, the more I kind of like this perk, because yes, giving that much of an increase to your melee is a little bit powerful. However, you know, getting a precision shot with a hand cannon consistently in super close ranges, that's kind of a more difficult thing to do. You're gonna want to be using, you know, a shotgun or even an auto rifle in those close ranges, not trying to get headshots with the hand cannon. So it's kind of a really high risk reward situation. Putting yourself in those positions, you have to now get a headshot on the guy with a Fellwinter's Lie. That's definitely, you know, a pretty high thing to ask, but getting the benefit of, you know, a pretty substantially increased melee output is pretty awesome as well. So it's like, again, really high risk reward, and I do like this idea. The next exotic concept we're going over is the Sice Screw exotic auto rifle concept by Adam Wynn. Now, this weapon, as you can clearly see, is a sleeper simulant inspired weapon, and I think that's awesome. I think that you could totally have a sleeper simulant inspired guns of all the different gun types. A sleeper simulant hand cannon, a sleeper simulant auto rifle in this case, scout rifle, all of that stuff could be inspired, you know, by the Seven Seraphs design, and I think that's absolutely awesome. Now, this weapon would have a very interesting exotic perk, and what it would do is upon getting a precision kill, you get a randomized buff, and this buff is going to be one of three things. Firstly, you can get increased damage. Secondly, you can get increased fire rate. And thirdly, you could get increased accuracy and recoil reduction. Now, I'll be the first to admit that may be overpowered. However, I do like the idea of getting a kill and getting kind of a lottery of different bonuses. You might get one of these things. Maybe it's more accurate. Maybe it does more damage. Maybe it has a higher fire rate. And some of these things are going to be better for different scenarios, right? Like increased damage when you're fighting, you know, a huge boss isn't going to matter that much. You might actually, you know, in PvP, want increased accuracy and recoil reduction more than increased damage. If you're in close range, you might want increased fire rate. And so, again, giving those randomized bonuses, that's something that hasn't really been explored too much in Destiny. I think that would be kind of, I just think that's a cool idea. I like the concept of it. In this case, in its actual iteration, it does sound a little overpowered, but again, it's the concept that I'm interested in. Now, the last two weapons we're going to go over are pretty unique because they represent what I've been talking about for a very long time with event-specific exotics, and the best way to explain this is to go over the first example, the Iron Link exotic Iron Banner auto rifle by Isaac Miller. And this is kind of what I'm talking about, having exotic weapons tied to certain events, tied to the Iron Banner, tied to Trials of Osiris, tied to hopefully upcoming PvE events. Again, having those exotics tied to those events would just give a more substantial reason to play and loot the game. I really do like how the Iron Banner has specific weapons and armor tied to it as rewards, but there's no reason that there isn't a special Iron Banner exotic as well. Now, the exotic perk for this weapon would make it so that when you get a precision kill with this auto rifle, your nearby teammates will get a buff that gives them faster reloading, better handling, and slightly increased damage. Now, the slightly increased damage, we'll have to see, you know, how much that is. It might be a pretty overpowered, but I do like the idea of getting a precision kill and then your nearby teammates getting even just faster reload, better handling is pretty awesome. That's a pretty amazing Iron Banner like PvP teamwork focused exotic. You get a kill if you're doing well, it helps your teammates around you out as well. That is a pretty neat idea. And the last exotic concept we're going over today is the Needle's Guide exotic scout rifle concept by Shadow Does Internet. Now again, this is an event-specific exotic. In this case, this would be another King's Fall exotic. Now if you're thinking, wait a minute, the Touch of Malice is already a King's Fall exotic, yes it is. But what's wrong with having more than one exotic tied to a raid? Right? Like, more exotics tied to special big events and pieces of content like King's Fall, the big only raid everyone's doing right now, would give people a much more substantial reason to play and keep playing. So that's why I'm really in favor of ideas like this. Just tying, why does, you know, where in the rulebook does it say that there can only be one exotic per raid? Why can't there be 2, 3, 4? Why can't there be a bunch? Like, more exotics is always a better thing. Heck, there were 3 tied to Prison of Elders. Now the exotic perk for this weapon would make it so that if you shoot one target with this weapon and then shoot another nearby target, they will be tethered together and their abilities will be neutralized. Now I'm not so sure about the abilities will be neutralized idea, but I do like the concept of shooting one guy and then switching targets, shooting another guy, and then tethering those enemies together. And to me, a great idea would be just to slow their movement. So both of those enemies would have slower movement speed until they kind of walked far enough apart from each other and break the tether. That would be a fantastic way to punish snipers who all bunch up in a hallway. Just shoot 2 of them and then watch them try to slowly escape as your teammates destroy them. Now that's it for the exotic concepts we're going over today. If you have your idea for an awesome exotic that you want to see in Destiny, here's how you submit it. I'm going to make a comment in the comment section down below. Reply to this comment with your idea, but make sure to read my comment in its entirety because it's going to give the correct format that you should submit your answer. Please remember not to spam, just submit your idea once, and please upvote my comment so that we can keep those threads up at the top so people can find them easily. If your comment doesn't get selected, don't worry, there's always next week. Now if you enjoyed this video, like the concepts being shown, and want to see more of this series, please remember to help me out by simply rating or sharing this video. Now if you want to see more Destiny content and make sure you don't miss next week's Exotic Concepts video, please remember to slap that subscribe button. If you want to get in touch with me and keep up to date with the latest channel activity, the best way is to follow me on Twitter. That's linked in the description down below, as is my Twitch channel, which you can also follow. Again, I hope you enjoyed the video, and as always, have a good day. Many Destiny players have left the game because they've been simply unhappy with what Bungie has been doing as of late. So again, they're really going to have to step their game up, and that's why we're talking about the top 4 things that will really help this raid be a fantastic piece of content and differentiate itself from the other 3 raids.